Hey guys, welcome to 2021. I'm John Robbins from the Astrotard. It's good to be back with you. Hey, today I want to show you how to do 4-panel mosaics in PixInsight. Here we go. Hey guys, so 4-panel mosaics. If we start by looking at Sequence Generator Pro, which is maybe a good starting point for this. If we go to Tools and Framing Mosaic Wizard, type in M42 here. Now for my setup, I'm at about 1.2 degrees by 0.9 degrees. And if I draw a little box here for the framing and mosaic, you can see this is how much of Orion I'm going to capture, and everything within that red box. Everything outside of it is not going to be captured by my setup. And again, that's using the Esprit 120 by Skywatcher connected to the ASI 1600 Mono by ZWO. There's a field of view calculator you can use to figure out what your field of view is. So if you go online and look for field of view calculator astronomy, bring up this astronomy.tools calculator, it'll kind of show you where you're at. So you choose the object that you're interested in this case, M42, and you choose your equipment. In my case, I've got a Skywatcher Esprit 120. Again, then that automatically fills in focal length and aperture and so forth. And I'm doing an image, not visual. So then I'm going to choose my camera here of ZWO ASI 1600 Mono, which is right there. And my binning is 1.1. Okay, so you can see right here, this is my field of view. 1.21 times 0.91 degrees. And that field of view corresponds to this little red window around Orion. That's a problem, right? Because I'm missing all the stuff that's outside of it. Well, in Sequence Generator Pro, we'll change our camera tiles here to be a 2x2, which makes it a 4-panel. And now we sort of center that larger red box. Now you can see that I can capture the entire thing. When I do this and I create the sequence, that's going to create the sequence that looks like, let me show you, I've already done this. Bring up my sequencer here. For M42, it'll create an M42-1, -2, -3, and -4. And you'll just have to capture each of those 4 sections individually. The other thing that you need to keep in mind when you do this is there is an overlap that you're going to have to consider when you're looking at Orion. So go back to that 4x4, or the 2x2 rather. I see how I've set here a 15% overlap. That's about the right number. I think the default is 20. I squeeze it to 15. The reason that you have to do that is because this frame here, 4, compared to this frame here, 3, they're going to be slightly rotated relative to one another. And that's just the nature of shooting this over multiple sessions and dealing with maybe moving and changing your equipment as you do it. These frames 4, 3, 2, and 1 are going to be slightly out of orientation from each other, and the overlap compensates for that. Okay, so anyway, that's how we captured this in Sequence Generator Pro. And when I was all done, this is what I was left with. I have 389 subs, which corresponds to about 6.5 hours of data. These are 60-second exposures using RGB red, green, and blue Astrodon LRGB-E series. For the session 1, or frame 1, I guess, I have, it looks like I've got about 44 or 45 for each of these different quadrants here. All right, so that's how I captured the data. Now we'll go to PixInsight, and this is how I mixed it together. So I'm not going to do I'm going to go really quick now through PixInsight, not going to show you the gory details, but you need to see the fundamentals and the basics for capturing the 4-panel. So we start with the batch preprocessing, weighted batch preprocessor. We'll add our bias here. I've got a master bias that I did. I got a master darks, and we're using 60-second darks. And my flats were R, G, and B. R, G, and B. And then my lights are here under M42. Now, when you capture these lights, you have to repeat the script 4 times. The first one, you're going to grab the -1s, and there's 44 of those. Just grab those -1s, add them in there. I'm going to use a master bias, a master dark, and a master flat. I'm going to set this to an output directory right here for M42 Q1, and you have to set different directories, at least I do, for each quadrant. So for quadrant 1, I have a Q1 folder, and we'll go ahead and let that run. Now you have to do this 4 times, once for each quadrant. Otherwise, the reason is you want to have each of these 4 quadrants captured independently and mixed together independently, and then we're going to merge them together at the end using gradient merge Mosaic. There are really 11 steps that we're going to follow here, and just to quickly brief you on them. The first one is, we've already shown you, Sequence Generator Pro, framing in Mosaic using that 2x2. Capture the frames, which we did. We've gone through 6.5 hours of data capture. Then we're going to integrate them, as we're doing now in the background, with weighted batch pre-processing for each of the 4 quadrants. Going to do this step 4 times, save the results in 4 different folders. Delete all the unnecessary folders after it's all done, so that you're only left with the master files. That's all I care about. Then you move all those master files, those XISF files, into PixInsight. You sort them by quadrant. I do a histogram, trans, and a stretch on them immediately. Then I create a reference image, and I'll show you how to do that. And then I position each of the quadrants relative to that reference image. And then I do a gradient merge Mosaic for each R, G, and B, and then I mix them. And at that point, the 4-panel is done. Okay, now that the script is done, now we can sort of look at our work. We'll close that. And by the way, remember, you got to do this 4 times, once for each quadrant. So if you bring up quadrant 1, this is what you see in there. Now we don't need the calibration files, we don't need the log files, we don't need the registered files. All we care about are these master files here. So we're going to grab the master data, put it in here. Do the same thing for quadrant 2, put it in there. Quadrant 3, and quadrant 4. Okay, now the next step obviously is get rid of the stuff we don't need, get rid of the rejects, and this one is red, quadrant 4, we'll call it R4. Close this one, this is green 4. Minimize. Close this one, and this one is blue 4. Okay, we've organized all the subs. Now let's go ahead and stretch them. So I'll start with R1, B1, and G1. I'll bring up the histogram trans and stretch the screen transfer function. And I don't do anything, I just stretch it. This is always the first thing I do. Stretch it. Pretty strong signal for R. Stretch it. Strong but noisy signal for G. And we'll stretch that one. Okay, then we repeat the process for quadrant 2. Okay, now they're all stretched. Now we need to make a reference image. What I mean by that is, if you look at R1 and R2, you can kind of see what's going on here. If we rotate this guy around, image, geometry, rotate 180, you can see R1 is right there, overlaps with R2 like that. And then we have R3, which is sort of up here. R3 overlaps like that. And then R4 We rotate that guy around. R4 is kind of over here. Put that guy down here. R4 overlaps like that. So you can kind of see how the 4 images, overlay with each other. So what we're doing with a reference image is creating a reference of the entire 4 together. So the way we do that is I start with the star align tool, and I'm going to say the setting here for working mode is Union Mosaic. So I'm going to start with R4, and I'm going to align it to R3 by just dragging this little diamond triangle over to there. And what that does is merges those two together, R4 and R3. It finds the common stars in the overlap position, and it creates a reference. Let's call that A for now. Not worried about that line right there. We're going to solve that later. Okay, now that I've done that, I can minimize these two guys. I don't need them anymore, at least for now. Okay, so now I'm going to take this. Now I'm going to do the same thing with R2 and R1. I'm going to take R2 and merge that with R1. And we'll call that B. Okay, so we're done with these two guys now. Now we're going to merge these two together. I'm going to take A into B. And that's our reference image. Let's call that ref. Like that. Now let's go ahead and close this guy. Actually, no, we don't need that guy. We can kill A and we can kill B. We don't need either one of those. All we need was this reference file. I think I'm going to go ahead and crop the edges a little bit. Again, I'm not worried about the overlaps. The overlaps will work themselves out, but the edges I do care about. So let's bring up our dynamic crop tool here. What I'm doing is just dusting off, clipping off the very corners so I don't have any black spots around my image there. Okay, so now that we have our reference file, we're going to do something really cool. You guys are going to like this. I do anyway. Come back to the star align tool, and again, starting with our reference that we just created, now we're going to use the working mode of register match, and we're going to add all of the files here, except our reference file. Add all of the quadrants for R, G, and B like that. And we're going to put them into their relative position relative to the reference by hitting the global button. What that's going to do is create 12 files like this. There's B1 in its position, G1, there's R1. Here now the quadrant 2 is starting up, and R2. There's quadrant 3. And here's quadrant 4. Isn't that cool? So it put everything relative to the reference file. It put their quadrants into their individual locations. This step is important because we're going to use these files in the gradient merge step. But to use them, we can't use them as a view. They actually have to be on the disk. So we have to save these offline to a folder. I called the folder PP. Don't ask me why, I just did. I'm going to save them all there, and we can close them once that's done. Okay, now you can see all those folders here in the PP directory. Here's where all those files are that we saved. Now let's just remind ourselves of where we are in this whole process. Let's bring up our steps here. So it looks like we've finished with step 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So we created the ref file, and step 9 was we positioned each of them into the relative quadrants. So this is where we are in our process here. Now we're about to go into the gradient merge and then the mixing. So this is the true magic of the whole thing. So now we'll bring up the Gradient Merge Mosaic tool under Process, Image, Integration, Gradient Merge Mosaic. And we're going to add the files that we did for each of the R, G, and B. So let's grab B, let's grab R1, R2, R3, R4. And I'm just going to leave all the defaults for now. I might later have to play with the black point or the shrink radius. But for now, I'm just going to leave it as is and see how it looks. Okay, so here's the default setting there. Not too bad. I'm pretty happy with that. Let's call that red. Just R. So that's what our R looks like. This is a successful merge. Gradient, the 4-panel mosaic is essentially there. We repeat the steps for green and blue. Finally, we'll repeat the last step for blue. And there's blue. Let's call that blue. Okay guys, that's it. That's 4-panel mosaic. Now that's a buzzkill if I ended the video right here, right? We should at least mix it somewhat and just kind of see what it looks like. So, but anyway, the tutorial is finished. That is your 4-panel mosaic, and that's how you do it. Just for grins and for fun, let's just go ahead and mix it. We'll put R, G, and B in there. See what we get. Without any tweaking or tuning, there's your Orion Nebula. So these are default, noisy. Still needs lots of work in terms of masks to get that bright area toned down, but hey, 4-panel mosaic, it works. Anyway, see you next week. Clear skies.